Hello, this is Evan Clark, intern at Vestigo Ventures, and today I'm here with Frazer Anderson, our investment analyst and in-house data scientist. This month we're focusing on price wars and financial services, but you're here to tell me about a price that continues to rise.
Yes, and it's not Cambridge real estate.
Alright, and what price would that be?
That price would be customer acquisition cost, or as we say in VC parlance, CAC.
Interesting. Alright, so let's jump right into it. Some people say that digital saturation is a force driving up customer acquisition cost. A lot of businesses spend on Google AdWords, social media campaigns, and other digital campaigns, and generate a lot of digital noise. So with so much noise, spend has to go up to cut through the crowd. Do you think this is a relevant factor to rising customer acquisition cost? If so, what can businesses do to mitigate the problem?
Yes, totally. And I mean, this problem is ubiquitous in all of consumer tech. It's particularly acute in fintech because of the high trust barriers that these companies have to cross with their customers. Venture funding, it's no secret, is quite abundant right now, but there's only a finite number of Facebooks, Twitters, Googles, Instagrams. So the cost of those marketing channels, of course, goes up when there's a lot of VC dollars flying around the marketplace. In terms of ways to mitigate those costs, I mean, what matters to investors and should matter to the companies they invest in is that ratio, that CAC to LTV ratio, or customer acquisition cost to customer lifetime value. So the best way to mitigate high customer acquisition costs is to create a product that will unlock enough value that it doesn't matter. That's obviously not particularly helpful information, but that's just sort of part of VC algebra. Now, other distribution channels that I think all startups should re-examine are, direct mail, whether that's snail mail or email. There are other channels like getting embedded with employers through sort of worksite management programs. Most online marketplace businesses like Jobble are fairly unbundled. So if you have a good product that you can distribute through those channels, that's something that all startups should really be looking at.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And then following up on that, a lot of tech startups have embraced this rush to market approach, looking to secure customers. And I'm sort of thinking about companies like Grubhub, Postmates, and Uber Eats that are all getting themselves to market by subsidizing customers with discounts in order to stand out. Do you think these businesses can remain competitive without driving up their CAC to such a high level?
Well, anytime that you offer some kind of incentive or discount program, you're either eating into your customer acquisition cost by making it higher, or you're eating into your customer lifetime value by making that lower. So it really depends on how you want to account for that. So that is sort of an untenable model if you're working with fairly tight unit economics, as in the sort of LTV to CAC ratio that you're basing your marketing spend off of is so close to break even that if your estimates are off by a little bit, your business is insolvent. Businesses, some of those that you mentioned are real network effects businesses, and businesses like that have less of a risk of sort of growing themselves to death because the value of the network expands every time they add a new user. So that's sort of another source of shareholder value.
Okay, and could you go into a little more about the network effect and how that plays into other startups? Maybe an example from our portfolio?
Sort of Jobble is a natural one. Every time you have a network business like that, the more brand awareness you have, the more people will go to it, and the more services are being offered by the two sides of a marketplace. And that's very, very difficult to replicate because you're not just replicating a core technology stack. You'd have to replicate the services that the users on the platform provide personally.
Gotcha. Okay. And then lastly, you're a data scientist. So you know that getting data is only half the battle. The only other part is making use of it. So when people spend to acquire data, are they not utilizing it well enough to justify the spend? Or is customer acquisition cost inflated because the tools people use to analyze the data aren't sharp enough?
Yeah, so I don't suspect that's the case. I actually spoke with Dave at length about this topic. In my experience, the types of growth marketers or growth practitioners that work in Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, Boston, New York are highly skilled, they're highly compensated, and they're highly incented to optimize dollars spent per new user. So I don't think it's the tools, I don't think it's the people. What I do think is a dynamic that you see is that these later stage venture rounds are being underwritten with fairly tight unit economics. And while they have convinced themselves and their investors that they will become, deca unicorns if they just acquire enough users, when 50 companies are doing this at the same time, and the obvious playbook for them is to just spend more on Facebook and Google, they'll all do it. And when you have this market dynamic in place, you end up driving up customer acquisition cost astronomically. And unfortunately, you're probably going to end up making a lot of businesses that have wonderful products and wonderful teams ultimately fail because they're going to take on too much overhead and burn through too much of their capital.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Frazer. Really insightful answers to the question on how is the price war affecting the customer acquisition cost today. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think your questions were fantastic. It was fun to be on the other side of the camera today. Yeah, thanks so much.
I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll be seeing you in the next newsletter.
Definitely. Thanks, Evan.